الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام من لا نبي بعده. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذا قالت أمه قصي وقالت أمي قصي فما وجدناه وهم لا يشعرون وقالت لأخته قصي. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Yes, as I said, we're going to start tonight with the story of the Bani Israel. The Bani Israel is a nation that is talked about the most in the Quran. The story of Nabi Musa, in any case, I think Nabi Musa is the most mentioned prophet in the Quran also, and the story of the Bani Israel is the most prominent story in the Quran of any other nation. So we're going to start a bit further than Nabi Musa. We're going to start with, just give a little bit of background to the Bani Israel. Yaqub, the father of Nabi Yusuf, he was called, his second name was Israel. So he's more or less the father of the Bani Israel. But his son, Nabi Yusuf, they had 11 brothers, another 11 brothers, and they were very jealous of him. It's so much beauty. When the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam went onto the Mi'raj, Yusuf was one of the Nabi Yusuf was one of the people on, I think, on the fourth heaven. He came across Nabi Yusuf, and the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam confirmed to say he had a comment on every Nabi that he met on his way up to the throne of Allah. But his comment was that Nabi Yusuf had the beauty of half of the people of the world. So much was his beauty. And that is a comment that Nabi also said, that the beauty of Nabi Yusuf was such striking and so overwhelming. They said he's got the beauty of the half of the people of the world. So his brothers were very jealous of him. So they went to his father to say that an animal had killed, and they brought back a shirt to show that the blood on how an animal attacked Nabi Yusuf, and he was eaten by the animal. But they sold Nabi Yusuf into slavery, and he ended up in Egypt. But in Egypt, he was working in the court of the king of that time. And as I told last time also, the Bible referred to the king of Nabi Yusuf at that time as Fir'aun. But it only came out lately that the Quran don't mention Fir'aun in the time of Nabi Yusuf. He mentioned the king. And it's only found out now lately that according to history, that time other nation took over the Egyptians, and there was not a pharaoh as a head of Egypt. As a lot of people say that we have copied the Bible, but there's one example of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the difference between what the Bible said and what the Quran is saying, that there was not a king in the time of Nabi Yusuf, and not a Fir'aun, but there was a king in place. So he worked in the office of the king, and he landed up in jail. I'm going to tell the story of Nabi Yusuf at one stage. So he landed up in jail, and there were some other prisoners, and one of the prisoners, he had a dream, but the dream goes like that at the end of the day, Nabi Yusuf interpreted the dream that this guy will land up in the court of the king, and he will serve the king with his drinks and stuff like that. So, and the other person was killed, but we can go into the story of Nabi Yusuf. So then at one stage, the king of Egypt had a dream of there were seven very fat cows and seven very thin cows. And nobody in the whole of the court of the king could interpret the dream. And then this person that are serving the drinks to the king remembered about Nabi Yusuf in jail. So he went to Nabi Yusuf and asked and told him about this dream. But now Nabi Yusuf because he wanted to go back to the king to say, this is how you interpret the dream. But Nabi Yusuf was very clever, so he said, I want to go to the king myself. So he went to the king and he laid out, and he laid out the dream for the king of the 7 thin cows and the 7 fat cows. The 7 fat cows means that there will be 7 years of abundant harvest in abundant water. And then after the 7 years, there will be 7 years of famine and hunger. So, Nabi Yusuf started to implement. So this king appointed Nabi Yusuf as one of his ministers. So Nabi Yusuf started developing the grain and to see that they plant to well enough grain and sorghum and all that type of stuff that they can store it for when the 7 years of famine and hunger will come. There was at that time there was 14 kingdoms. No, in the whole area there, but it's only in that one kingdom of Egypt that had enough food for the whole 7 years. So at that time there was abundant water also. So there was enough water, so they relayed the water of the Nile to a dam. So they built a dam there also, so that they can have enough water for the long term of the 7 years. So at that stage, how it works when people came, when kingdom was in trouble, the people used to sell themselves into slavery, or sold their children into slavery. So there's a lot of people that came into Egypt and offered their services to as slaves to the king of Egypt. So that is more or less the story of Nabi Yusuf. And at this stage also, Nabi Yusuf also invited his 11 brothers to Egypt. So they stayed in Egypt, 11 brothers. So there were 12 of them, and there were 12 tribes and they developed over the years into 12 massive tribes that lives in Egypt. So they were not given, when the Pharaoh came back into power, the Israelites were not given the same rights as the Egyptians. So they were put into some sort of ghettos, and they were used as slave labor to build all this massive buildings that was next to the Nile, that are still next to the Nile. So at that time, the people say that some of the pyramids were also built, because the Israelites were very strong people. So they built all that type of stuff and all the buildings. So when people came down the Nile, they saw the massive buildings of the Egyptians, and they were very they were very afraid of them. So over the years, and after Nabi Yusuf died, so the 12 tribes of the Israelites stayed in Egypt, in developed massive hundreds and thousands of people, and the Egyptians saw them as a danger to them. And then they start selling, and they put them into ghettos and put up massive gates in front of them. The only way that they could escape was through the Nile, but the Nile was full of crocodiles. And then when they're coming down the Nile, the first thing that they will come across was the city, and people could see from the city if some of the Israelites were trying to escape. And further down was the palace of the king, the palace of the Pharaoh. And at that time, the mightiest army. So it was a very daunting task, or people must be been very, very courageous if they want to escape the thing. And on the way of then the Pharaoh started to see some danger in carrying on, in the Israelites will become more and more and more. So they decided that he will kill all the boys in the family, so that they cannot become a massive army. And if people are angry, and the young people will rise up against their own, and then they may lose his crown. So they decided so every now and then they will kill all the boys that are living up from the Israelites, so they could not build up an uprising against him. So he was very notorious for planning and to see that if there's any danger, he will be overthrown. So he started killing all the young Israelites. He spared all the women because he knew that they can still have some more, so more boys and children, but he had to curb the amount of Israelites that were living in Egypt. So this is more or less a story, just a background story to the Israelites. So at one stage, the Haman and his Haman is mentioned in the Quran. He was one of the most senior generals of the Pharaoh. They were walking around in the ghettos and trying to look for firstborn or newborn babies, and they in the Quran describe his and وَإِذَا ila ummi Musa and ardi'i. Nabi Musa's mother, she didn't know what to do, so Allah inspired her to tell her. Apparently, Nabi Musa was just born, and he was crying and screaming and stuff like that as any newborn. So he gave to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired the mother of Nabi Musa to give him milk. When they start giving him milk, he was quiet. So obviously he was quiet. So the Egyptians didn't hear any cry from him, and they walked past Nabi Musa's mother's home. No further. So at this stage, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَإِذَا خِفْتُ فَعَلْقِهِ فِي الْيَمِّ وَلَا تَخَافِي وَلَا تَحْزَنِي. And when this is finished, you must put the baby into a basket and put him into the river. وَإِنَّ رَادُ إِلَيْكَ وَجَعِلُ مِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. We will look after him, and he will become a messenger one day. So that was inspired by Allah to tell Nabi Musa's mother that she first has to give him milk and then put him into a basket, and Allah will look after him, and then one day he will become a messenger, a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then further, the basket was put into the river. It was flowing down the river, and it came to the palace of Nabi of the Pharaoh. So the basket and some of the family of Pharaoh and his wife saw the basket and took it out of the river. And she was very, because she had no children, she was very happy. But they could obviously see that it was a Israelite, because the Israelite was more brown skin and the Egyptians were a bit more darker skin. So you could immediately see. And then you can imagine all the people around. Her name was Asya, the wife of Pharaoh, and it's mentioned in the Quran. She was one of the most pious people that ever lived on this earth. So she took it up she took it into to her, and when she looked at the baby, the baby brought her comfort. Qurrata ayni li walak. As I think we mentioned Qurrata ayunu in one of this to us initially. The baby was the coolness of their eyes, and she showed it to Nabi, to the Pharaoh also, and it was the coolness of his eyes also. She could see that the baby, Allah put it into their hearts, into their mind, that they were looking at the baby and they couldn't take their eyes off the baby, because the baby was giving them such calmness and the coolness of the eyes. And then Asya, the wife of Pharaoh, said, "La taqtulu, don't kill him. Asa yanfa'una wa yattakhidha walada wa hum la yash'urun." It can be a benefit to us. And then at that stage, Pharaoh was still looking at the baby. He couldn't take his eyes off the baby. And then yanfa'una wa yattakhidha walada wa hum la yash'urun. Maybe we can even adopt him. So that is the present that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave, or the miracle that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to Nabi Musa. They didn't even thought about killing him. They could see he was Israelite, but they didn't kill him, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to Fir'aun and to Asya the face of Nabi Adam, and Nabi Musa gave them coolness and calmness. And now that is what is happening at the sort of the palace side. Now the Quran moves back to the place where, back to the house of Nabi Musa, where his mother was. فَأَصْبَحَ فُعَادِ أُمِّ مُوسَى فَارِغًا. And Nabi Musa's mother was in deep sadness. She knew it was from Allah that the baby went out, but she was Ummi Musa fariqa. Her heart was trembling, and they was very scared that something could happen to the Nabi Musa. وقال لولا أربتنا على قلبها لتكون من المؤمنين. And then Allah, it's the same Rabatna. We mentioned Rabatna in the story of the Ashab al-Kahf. وربط على قلوبهم إذ قاموا فقالوا ربنا رب السماء. That was a story that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tied up the hearts of the Ashab al-Kahf, that they can be firm and in a dress of court where they were trialed for not obeying the king. So in this case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tied up the heart of Nabi Musa, that she can become calm and accept it also. And this is why the word is tied up, rabata ala qulubihim ala qalbiha, is that in times of when we are in great danger or going through great difficulties, people sometimes they lose their iman and something bad happens to them. So when it's difficult at times, we must always make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to tie up our hearts and keep us not from deviating from the path of Allah. In a lot of times, you're hearing people that went through difficulties, and then I know personally of people that went through difficulties in their life with money and stuff like that, and then they would turn away from the Quran. But in that case, so it's very important to recognize that people are going through difficulties. And then people go through difficulties, their mind is not always on Allah and see why I'm not being helped. I'm in such difficulty, but nobody helps me. Where's Allah? And then sometimes their heart become deviated from the path of Allah. So it's important when we are going through difficulties to remember that we must make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to tie up our hearts, especially young children. This is meant, in the next part of the story is also meant for younger people. They're going through difficult stuff. The iman is not so strong as it should be. So it's difficult. It's easy for them to get distracted and move away. And then the next is even more important. And then Nabi Musa's mother told his sister, Qusi. Qusi means follow him. And this is also to look at when I was watching some stuff and reading some stuff up on this topic, is to say Qusi is to follow. But Nabi Musa's mother just told his sister to follow him. She didn't tell him you must hide or look around the corner when stuff. Just Qusi. But Nabi Musa's sister knew what it was to follow him. Not to be not to be let on that she is following Nabi Musa. She must be very cautious in where she goes. So she was very cautiously. So it is better to give people shorter instruction that they can work it out for themselves. Not to give every detail, to anyone every time, to say, go to the shop, you have to turn left there, then you have to turn right there. Go to the shop and buy something. But you don't tell them if that is not available, you can buy something else. So the child must get that exercise or the experience of working out things for themselves as they go along. That's the best way. You give them advice, but not to go into so much detail. Especially with children, when you tell them, here's a cup, then you should know. They pick up the cup. Then you should know to take the cup to the kitchen, so it can be washed, or you can wash it yourself. It doesn't have to tell you, pick up the cup, take it to the kitchen and wash it. So generally the instructions must just be to say, here's a cup, and the children must immediately work it out to say, we have to go here, we have to take it to the kitchen, wash it. So it is important way on how he trained children to know to think also, not to give them the whole kitchen sink. You just have to tell them certain words, and they have to work it out for themselves to build their experience and to build their confidence in themselves, to make decisions and to and to go forward. So the next part of the thing, فردنا إلى أمك تقرع ففردنا إلى وحرمنا عليهم إلى المراضع من قبل فقال هل أدلكم على بيت. And then Nabi Musa, in the Quran said that all the milk was made haram for Nabi Musa except his own mothers. So a lot of people around the palace, they wanted to give Nabi Musa milk, but he couldn't take it in. He was spitting it out and everything. So they tried so many things to let Nabi Musa eat, but he couldn't eat because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised Nabi Musa's mother that she will get to him again. So at one stage, the servants of the Asya came out of the palace, and then immediately Nabi Musa's sister saw him. Sister saw them, and then she asked him, where are you going to say? We have to look for someone that can feed Nabi Musa. And his sister immediately said, no, I know precisely where we have to go. We have to go to this house and that house. And Nabi Musa's mother was again reunited with him. It's again, the sister wasn't told anything. She worked it out on herself. When the servants of Asya came out, and she immediately knew how to work with them and tell them, you have to go to this house, maybe that house, but I think at that house, there is what you can find. So Nabi Musa was reunited with his mother, in that sense, by his sisters, sort of innovation to say it. So the first part of the story is to say, Qusi, don't let it overrun you, but don't let it overpower you, or you have to do things on your own a little bit. So Nabi Musa's, so that's a story more or less for the youngsters. This is a story for youngsters. It's a story of Ashab al-Kahf, what for the youngsters. This is also a clear story to younger people on how to go about living your life and taking decisions, but you should not be given the whole kitchen sink to do what you want. So this is a power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He promised Nabi Musa's mother that she will get back to him. And if she told that anyone that story that I was given inspiration to put it into into water, in the river will take you to the palace of the king, and the king's mother and the king's and Pharaoh's wife was looking for someone to bring it. It was totally unbelievable to anyone. If she told their story beforehand, I was given instructions by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put my newborn into the river. So it says also that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala committed to his plan, and he followed it through, and he reunited Nabi Musa again with his mother. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. There's another half an hour left or so I will give next week the story of when Nabi Musa grown up, and we have gone through the story a little bit also during the du'as of how he fled to Madian. And so there's another story also that we can do at a later stage on how he met Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's another 2 weekends left of the story of Nabi Musa. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, and Allah knows best.